Hi there, loves. This is Annette of AnnetteLeonard.com, joining you for another episode of Chronic Wellness. I am again going to talk to you about the Americans with Disabilities Act that just celebrated its 30th birthday. And one of the things I want to talk to you about is another thing that we got right with that legislation. And part of that is something that is called reasonable accommodations. And it's very interesting, this standard that we put into discrimination law of reasonable, because like reasonable means one thing to me, another thing to you, another thing to somebody else. So who's just defining this reasonable standard? Well, as with many things pertaining to the law, the courts are defining what is reasonable. But there is this standard that if you have less than 10 employees, the ADA in all of its provisions does not always apply to you. And part of the reason that that is in place is this notion that if you cannot afford to pay for all of the accommodations, you should not lose your whole business, the whole thing, because of someone's need to be accommodated. And you know, this one is sometimes a bitter pill to swallow. You know, like I want to go into this apartment building, I want to go into this shop, I want to work for this place, and it cannot be made accessible for me. And it is also the way that like giant corporations, huge companies, places that have a ton of employees and lots of money for their shareholders can't wiggle out of the provisions of the ADA saying that they can't afford it. So it's a continuum, it's a balancing act, but it is something that ultimately is right about the law so that those who can pay must pay, and those who can't pay shouldn't be shut down because of it. So that's something that I'm going to argue we did right in the law, even though sometimes it's still a hard nut to crack or still an obstacle, obviously, for those of us with disabilities when it impacts us or infringes upon our access, because it's those smaller places that we need or want to be a part of. Has this affected you? Do you have a story to tell about it? I'd really be glad to know. So share your comments. As ever, I'd love to know your questions or what you're thinking about. And in the meantime, thank you for being here. I hope that you are finding ways to be well.